Hello once again, it's Mr. Pete, your YouTube shop teacher, and this is tips number 760, which is part 2 of a two-part series. Be sure and go back and watch part 1, which is number 759. I'll put the link in the description, but the subject of these two videos is Dumore tool post grinders, and I covered these three in part 1. This is the 2-inch, 3-inch, and 4-inch tool post grinders. Now I'm going to talk about some of the other machines that we got, and I think I might have failed in the first video to tell you what these are really for. They're essentially a grinding attachment that fits onto a lathe of just about any size depending on what you're doing, and it allows you to do cylindrical grinding on a lathe. Now this is not as good as a real cylindrical grinder, but it can get you by, especially useful for grinding lathe centers. So in this video I'm going to talk about this Dumore handy grinder that can also be used as a tool post grinder, and this Sears Craftsman grinder, along with the various attachments here that allow you to use them on the lathe, and the diamond dressers for the wheels. And then there will be a little extra credit near the end of this video, and I will talk about these other Dumore products that I have here, a Dumore drill press and yet another Dumore grinder. I think I'll start out by talking about this Dumore hand grinder. It runs at 22,000 RPM. Switch right there. This is brand new, virtually. Well, I've had it for 5 years, but the Dumore company did donate this to me for the good of the cause. It's a great company. I am not employed by them, but they did give this to me. I had an older one, much older than this. It was virtually the same, but I sold it at the time that this was given to me. Now this uses collets. They also sold one that was available with a little chuck on here. There's several different models. I'll show you that here in just a second. Did I say 22,000 RPM? I guess I did. And it said maximum of a 1-inch wheel right here on the label, which is about this size. Several wheels and wrenches and so on came in this real nice box, this kit, as well as a little dresser. I'm not crazy about this kind, but that was included. And there are more grind wheels down in here. Those were with the other one that I got rid of. I kept the wheels. One thing I do not like about this grinder is that it takes 2 wrenches in order to tighten the wheels. And that is a 1/4-inch collet in there. There might be another collet in the box, I'm not sure. But so it basically takes 3 hands to do this. Make sure you unplug it when you change wheels or attachments, whatever you put in here. Now this can be used on the lathe, or it can be used on the bench or by hand. So in addition to just using this as an offhand grinder, and I have a bunch of these, I showed you one in part 1, it was made by Skill. These are genuine Dumore attachments. They are very old. You can see just a little bit of the decal left on that. Same with this, and I've had these for a long time. They apparently are not available because they are not shown in the booklet anymore. But let's talk about this one first. I do not particularly like this one because it's just a clamp, and I noticed that when I put it on here that it just doesn't seem like it is that sturdy, and it has to be held on the main body here rather than on this turned down portion, which I'll talk about here presently. So it would clamp on like this, tighten it down real well. You really have to have this rigid if you're going to use it for grinding on a lathe, but I'll just snug that up for now. And this could be held in a vise, your bench vise, and you do your grinding by hand. I don't like that at all, but I guess that some people do that. This one also could be used for that purpose. And this is what I mean by holding it in the bench vise. I would never use it this way myself because I have so many other grinders, and I would much prefer using my Fordham grinder. for that type of work. So this is the documentation for this Series 9, which is what I have just shown you. But there are several other models. There's the Series 10 with the tiny little chuck on it. Very similar to what I showed you yesterday. That would be similar. With the skill grinder. And of course there's a parts list and a breakdown and about 5 pages of safety warnings. All of the Dumore products are made in the USA, and I have to tell you that they are very expensive. Very nice strain reliever on this. I talked about strain relievers the other day. I like the position of the switch and even a little safety shield here that they did not have on the older models. And it is a universal brush type of motor. They always tend to be a little noisy, don't they? Now, how is this held in the lathe, you ask? Well, you'll notice that the shank here on this accessory is approximately the size of a Armstrong or a Williams holder. So you would simply insert this into this holder. Now notice that the diameter here on this portion is a little bit different than the main motor housing. That would go on like that. And like I say, I don't think they make these anymore, so you'll have to find one on eBay. Because I figured if they made one, they would show it in this documentation along with the other accessories and repair parts, and they do not. Now let's step over to the Atlas lathe here real quickly, and I'll show you how it is set up. Remember that in this two-part video series, I am not actually showing any grinding. You have to refer back to some of my other videos for that. So here's the general setup for the little Dumore grinder in the tool post, a lantern type tool post, but I suppose this could fit in a quick change type tool post if you had a holder that would accommodate that size, which is about 3/4 or maybe a little bit less. And then let me point out something else about this little grinder. So this little grinder can be used for internal work depending on the size of the grinding nib that you use. Notice that there's quite a bit of reach here in the shank here, or not the shank, I guess we'd call it the spindle. And you could vary the length of your grind wheel depending on the length of the shank. But I must tell you that this lacks rigidity in so many respects, and we need rigidity when we do any kind of grinding, even though you might think of it as not creating much pressure like a regular lathe cutting tool will. Alright, so that's for internal grinding. And of course you could use it for external grinding as well, and you normally would run the lathe in reverse, but we always risk on this type of threaded spindle the chuck coming loose, and that's always something you have to be careful of. But again, it's to me of limited use because of the lack of rigidity. But if you're trying to get a real good finish or produce a very accurately sized workpiece, sometimes grinding is just the ticket, so you might try that. I was going to talk about this little Dumore dresser a little bit later in the video, but I think I'll cover it now while I'm at the lathe. This is the Diamond Nib right here, and it can be positioned in the hole that it's in, or this hole, or this hole. And notice that we got a bit of a V right here, so the dresser would be mounted to the work. Of course you could mount this, yeah, I would say mount it to the work. And make sure you don't turn the machine on. You would want to unplug it, and then of course you would turn your grinder on and run it back and forth across the diamond. And you really need to true the wheel every time you use it. I'm sorry if you're disappointed by this video. I know it's turned out to be more or less a show and tell type video, but it's helping me because I didn't realize that I had so much of this stuff and I have to get rid of it, but please do not ask to buy any of it. But I want to talk about this Craftsman grinder next, and then I realized that I have two of them. But before I do that, I have another one. This was $5 at a garage sale. It's a Bosch, but there is no particularly good way to hold this that I know of at this time because of the diameter right here. And I have to level with you, I do not like using these offhand grinders, either with a grinding wheel or a carbide burr. And let's get back to talking about strain relievers again, and that's what I think about the rubber ones. I love the old spring ones. I talked about that in the last video. But what about this Sears Craftsman? And notice that here they call it the Rotary Die Grinder. Sears Craftsman. On the other one, I don't know which is older. They call it the Craftsman Industrial Grinder, but they're pretty similar. This one is missing the bail, which would allow you to hold it, I guess, vertically like you would a Fordham. Nice strain reliever, hasn't been damaged yet. And the beauty on these Craftsman, I like them very well because you got a spindle lock right here. So you hold this up against your stomach to change, and the spindle will come around and you'll feel it lock like you do on offhand grinders right there, and then you'd use one wrench. And this one has, I believe, an 1/8 inch collet, and the other one has a 1/4 inch collet, and there might be some extras in this. I don't know, I'd have to look. This is the original Craftsman box, made of plastic, but the lid is long gone. You know, those hinges break on all of that plastic stuff. I think you know that. Alright, let me take a minute to talk about this in regards to using it as a tool post grinder. Now notice here that there is a rubber grommet washer, and I don't know what the purpose of that is other than to maybe protect this surface or give you a better grip when you're holding it close like this for offhand. But anyway, I would say it's to protect it, and you'll see why we don't want any nicks in here. This is a holder designed specifically for this, and I'll show you a picture in the Sears tool catalog in a minute. Very heavily constructed, I believe manufactured by Dumore for them, because it's the exact same color. And notice that you can adjust the height of it simply by loosening that bolt, and it will track in a more or less a tongue and groove. This is very heavy and high quality. Notice the split hole here that will close up. Well, why am I showing you all that? Well, here's why. Because the Craftsman grinder will fit in there and is held by this area and by this machined area right here. So it's really nice, I'll have to say, very nice. So you'd fit it in there almost like a holster, and then we would tighten this, and it's extremely rigid. Notice that the switch is right here, I guess I said that. And this will fit into the T-slot of the compound. Let me tighten that up, and we'll go over and stick it in the lathe just for a minute to show you the general idea of that. One other observation, as long as I'm observing. First of all, notice the long strain reliever right here compared to this. And I think this is probably the newer one, and maybe they were just saving 2.5 cents by making that shorter. I don't know, but the longer the strain reliever is, in my uneducated position, the better it is. And the other thing I was going to say in this regards, as I had remembered it, this would have fit on here also, but it does not. It is quite a bit too large, almost 1/8 of an inch too large, as you can see, and there's no room for tightening this. So this is not meant for the Craftsman, it is meant for the Dumore. Atlas Lathe, here we come. You know what? This is a far more superior design than the other grinder. This is so rigid. And look, your lock is right here. If you want to change cutters, or I should say grinding wheels, and this is a carbide burr. That doesn't really belong in there for this application. But also notice this. I can loosen this bolt. Boy, that was tight. And we can change the height of it to bring it on center. Big improvement over using the lantern type tool post with a wedge. Raise your hand if you have one of these in your shop. I don't know if they're still available. Well, I guess I do know they're not available at Sears anymore, because last week they closed the last Sears store in the Chicagoland area, the one at Woodfield Shopping Center, which was very near their Hoffman Estates World headquarters, which now is turned into a big donut shop. By the way of information, I have seen on YouTube where people made a holder for Dremel type grinders. Be smaller than this, but they made them out of a hardwood, let's say maple, and claim that they are at least semi-successful. I can't imagine that they don't vibrate like crazy, because these are really such cheap tools. And you know what? I have about 6 of these, and I tried to sell one at a tool meet the other day for $10 with all kinds of accessories, and nobody even looked at it. One last thought: since this is a brush type motor, it can be controlled as far as the speed is concerned with the average speed control. If you wanted to change the speed, this runs pretty fast, and the same goes for some of the other grinders that I showed you, but certainly not that biggest Dumore. One last thing I wanted to cover before we get into extra credit here, and I know I've talked for too long and too much, but these are wheel dressers. Why do we dress a wheel? Because we want to sharpen it, we want to shape it, and we want to true it and get it into balance. I already showed you all about the Dumore dresser. This is a little one that I made, can be adjusted to different angles, can be held in a 3-jaw chuck. May lack rigidity a little bit. This is a genuine Atlas Craftsman dresser. There's the Diamond Nib, and I showed that in a standalone video very recently, and this was given to me by Trenton Hudson. And this is adjustable in height and fits the flat ways of an Atlas Craftsman lathe. This is the 1966 Craftsman tool catalog. And let's refer to this picture. This is the Craftsman grinder in 1966. It appears to be all metal. That was before they started using a lot of plastic in hand tools, although there's still plenty of metal on here as well. This one is very well constructed, and in 1966 it was $39 for the kit, including these little wheels and bits. And there is the holder, and it is referred to as a bench stand and holder. So it can be held in the bench by this part on the bottom, similar to what I showed you a little bit earlier with the Dumore. And this little bench stand and holder cost $7.99 in 1966. It would be considerably more now if it was available, and probably more than that on eBay if you can find it. This is how Sears suggested to hold it in a bench vise using this attachment. It is quite rigid. I hope you liked this show and tell video. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Now that about concludes this video, but there'll be a lot of still pictures at the end. And for you guys in the back of the room that were throwing rivets while I'm trying to talk, you're going to stay after school, and there's some extra credit for you. And you'll only have to stay for 5 minutes, but that will make you late for your bus, and you got to walk home, and that's your real punishment. So long for now for most of you, but the bad boys, I'll see you as soon as the bell rings. Okay, this is extra credit for you bad boys. And I want you to listen up and no talking. You may not know this, but the Dumore company out of Racine, Wisconsin might have been more famous for its motors than it was for the actual grinders, and they must have made millions of these for all different kinds of uses. A lot of them were parts of automated machines, like I told you before, where they were doing drilling from 3 or 4 or 10 different sides all at the same time. And there was a large variety of these motors. They tended to be small in size, but here's an example of just about 2 of them, which I'm going to talk about. And if you look in their catalog or their website, I think you're going to find some of this merchandise. I'll call it merchandise. These are extremely high quality and expensive, and they would probably custom make them for companies with different mounts and so on. So let me talk about these 2 different machines real quickly. This is a Dumore high-speed sensitive drill press. They are still making these. I believe I saw them in the catalog. They are probably expensive, and in factories you might see rows and rows of young women drilling holes in circuit boards with these. And by sensitive we mean that you can feel the drill drilling, so you do not tend to break delicate small drill bits. I don't know how much this costs, but it does basically the same job as this little camera-on drill press that I've talked a lot about in other videos, and this is a $1,500 machine. I do not know how much this is. I know it looks a bit like a Mixmaster, but it is super quality, and this one still runs fine. We can adjust the table up and down. We can move the head into different positions, and it uses that smallest little Jacob's chuck that I showed you on that, oh, it wasn't the Bosch grinder, one of those grinders the other day. So I still use this from time to time. The whole surface here of the table is pecked through, and this can be rotated as well. So this is a neat little machine, not to be belittled. All cast iron, heavy base. And I'm not paid by Dumore to tell you that. And the final item I want to show you is this blade sharpener or knife sharpener. And supposedly this went along with a shopsmith surfacer to sharpen the blades. It looks like it's about 16 or 18 inches. And it used a Dumore motor. I don't know if this is worth showing you, but many companies use the Dumore motors in their products. So the whole idea was that the blade was mounted right in here. I don't know how it was clamped. And you could adjust the height down at the bottom, and this would run back and forth on this rod back here to sharpen the blade at high speed. The funny thing is that a man bought the surfacer, but he did not buy this, even though the auctioneer announced it. But I thought you'd be interested in the Dumore motor if anybody is still with me watching this. And that runs real smooth. And I put these tags also in the pictures at the end. Well, thank you very much for watching, and you guys that had to stay after school can walk home now. And I'll see all of the rest of you in my next video. Remember, I have almost 1,500 videos on YouTube. Merely search for the word tubalcain, which is in every title. So long for now.